Hey guys, welcome to another day of my 12 days of Christmas where you're getting tutorials, giveaways, and specials. So today's tutorial is a double barrel edible image covered cake. It is for a good friend of mine. So first things first, when you're stacking 4 layers, I like to add a board in between the 2 layers just so it's easy to slice for the customer. So anytime I'm prepping a cake for edible image, I make sure I try to get it as smooth as possible. I cover the back of my edible image with shortening, and I make sure to paint it over the entire surface. I mean, you can use your fingertips if that seems easier, but I just don't like shortening on my hands. So I cover the whole edible image. And this one, because it is a tall cake, there will be some space at the top or the bottom. I chose the space to be at the bottom because I'm going to add a ribbon to hide that. So I line it up perfectly with the top. Now, mind you, the top does have a round piece of black fondant to cover the white. The side is totally buttercream, and I'm just using the edible sheets to apply them to the cake. Now, the good thing about using shortening is that if you do not like the position, which is, if you watch it for a couple of seconds, you're going to see that I was displeased with the position. But having the shortening behind the edible image made it easy to just pull back and reposition into the correct spot that I like. Now, you try to line it up as perfectly as possible. Sometimes it lines up perfectly, but sometimes, it's slightly off. But I try to get it as consistent as possible. This cake is totally chilled, meaning the buttercream was firm and cold to the touch. It wasn't wet feeling, but it was dry and firm and totally cold. Now, I like to work fast when I'm doing this because as your cake temperature warms and comes to room temperature, the condensation starts, and you can't help the condensation. So I always advise to have your stuff ready and move quickly. So here I am just lining it all up. I have one more piece to add. I added a whole sheet, and then I trim it directly on the cake to make sure that I cut that excess. Now, if you don't want to trim it on the cake, you can measure it, measure the space on the cake that needs to, and then cut the sheet the custom size. I just find trimming it on the cake is easier for me. I'm using a fondant smoother to make sure I'm getting any bubbles completely from behind that edible image. Here I am leveling off the top to make sure it's totally lined with that black fondant on top, smoothing out anything. And then I'm going to add the ribbon to conceal that. It was about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch thick of cake at the bottom that you could see. I add a little bit of shortening behind the ribbon just to attach it, and then wrap that totally around. Now, I find that when you're getting edible image printed, it does matter if you ask them to print it up and down or landscape. I find that when I'm using a cake and I want to cover more where the cake is not as tall, I will get it in landscape just to cover it. So I always try to make sure that I line the sheets to where the front sheet is totally covering as much as possible so that the seams are on the side. You want to always avoid the seams being on the front. Just because, who wants a seam on the front? I mean, let's be real. So I try to make sure they're always to the side and as far back as possible. Here I am adding her name. Her name is Milan. She is my friend's daughter. And we wanted to get all shades of green. So when I bought my florals, I made sure that I got different variations of green because I really wanted that green to pop on that houndstooth pattern. This is it all pulled together. This is literally one of my favorite cakes out of my entire cake career. As you can see it spinning, you can see the seams. It's 2 seams there towards the back. Sometimes it's unavoidable, like I said. But before I go, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.